Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Top 10 Tips and Tricks for Canadian Pilots. Today's webinar will focus on a variety of topics that we're excited to bring to you today. My name is Dominik, and I have the pleasure of being a part of ForeFlight's Pilot Support Team, and I also have the great pleasure of being joined by my colleague Adrian today. Hi, Adrian.
Hey, Dom, and thanks for having us today. My name is Adrian Tegler, and I'm also a member of ForeFlight's Pilot Support Team.
So today we compiled a series of topics that we found useful for ourselves when we use ForeFlight, and we definitely think it's useful for both VFR and IFR Canadian pilots. So for today's topics, we're going to talk about some filing features, how exactly to file in ForeFlight, and kind of the tips and tricks with regards to that. Chart mechanics and features, documents, profile view, and terrain awareness and planning features. Those are all things that we're going to cover in the first part of today's presentation.
Yep. And then we're going to continue on by looking at some runway performance for piston aircraft, and then talk about enhanced weight and balance that's new to ForeFlight. We'll get into looking at fuel prices, and then talk about how we can check weather and our flights when we're on commercial flights. And then we're going to finish with the topic of ADS-B in Canada.
And as you can see today, we've got a lot to cover. So just bear in mind that we may not be able to fit it all into the 1 hour time frame.
Before we begin, you can ask questions via the GoToWebinar message panel, and we'll respond to as many questions as we can during the presentation, and we'll also get to others during the Q&A at the end. And make sure to ask your questions early so we can get to them as soon as we can. If you have any audio problems, we recommend joining from a computer and not from a mobile device. This session is being recorded and will be accessible at foreflight.com/webinars. All right, let's get started.
All right, so our first topic today is about filing. We get a lot of questions at ForeFlight on exactly what type of filing capabilities exist in the application. And the answer to that is basically all types of filing are available to Canadian pilots. So that includes intra-Canada VFR, IFR filing. We even can accommodate IFR to VFR flight plans or VFR to IFR flight plans. And those, if you're not familiar with those, are YFR and both ZFR flight plans. And probably the most common question we get is, can I file from Canada to the US? And the answer is yes. Not only can you do it to the US, but you can also do it back into Canada. Some tips I have for VFR filers in Canada, if you're filing just a straight VFR flight plan in Canada, is that we may all know this already, but just to verify, if you file a flight plan and you file an estimated time of departure in Canada, it's estimated that that flight plan will be activated at your estimated time of departure. If you decide not to fly, then you really do have to call NAV CANADA to cancel your flight plan. Otherwise, if you're overdue on your ETA, the search and rescue activities will start to be initiated. So just keep that in mind. One thing I just want to instill in people's minds is that if you decide not to fly or cancel your flight plan, please make sure that you contact NAV CANADA via the phone to cancel your flight plan. For IFR filers, there's something to keep in mind as well. If you decide to amend an IFR flight plan, especially your destination or your route, NAV CANADA really does recommend canceling the existing flight plan you have in there with them and filing a new one completely. It avoids just some discrepancies when trying to amend it. So that's just a recommendation that we have. Flight plans can be amended, canceled, or delayed up to 45 to 60 minutes before the proposed departure time. What's also very important to note is that when you are filing back-to-back IFR flight plans, the departure time for the second flight must be at least 30 minutes after the arrival of the first plan. So otherwise, NAV CANADA will treat the second flight plan as overlapping, and it just might get rejected. So for all those IFR filers, keep that in mind. Cross-border filing. So some tips with cross-border filing. You would file it just as you would a regular flight plan. We do recommend, especially for the VFR pilots, filing a waypoint or a nav aid within 15 minutes of the border on either side. It just helps to clean up kind of the route a bit for NAV CANADA and the FAA side. and it allows for a little more of a smoother transition when you're filing. So a waypoint on either side of the border or a nav aid would work. Another thing to mention with VFR flight plans, cross-border VFR flight plans, you are going to close that flight plan with whatever country you're going into. So let's take a look at a VFR flight plan filing example in Canada. Now, in this example, we're actually going to go from a lat long point to a airport in Canada. You can file from and to lat longs in Canada. There's just some things you got to keep in mind. So I've built this route here. We're going to go from a random farmer's field, let's call it Parker Field, to Wyerton here in southwestern Ontario. Once I've built my flight plan and I'm happy with the aircraft I've selected, the route, the altitude, we'll skip over most of that right now, but I'm going to send it to my flights page. I'm going to verify that I've filled out all the appropriate fields there that I would like, as well as my payload, fuel, if that's part of my subscription. And then at the very bottom right-hand side, I'm going to select Proceed to File. This is where you fill out essentially your ICAO flight plan form. With the ability to file from a lat long, you actually do require to put a place name, and that is a required field you see here in the departure section. So the airport is listed as a lat long, but the place name you have to put in, and that's a NAV CANADA requirement for it to be filed. So Parker Field, for example, we're going to put in there. Oops. Your time of departure and your persons on board, that's standard as well. But that field needs to be filled in there. And if we go down further, you see that the destination is an airport, so the place name is optional. If we were filing to a lat long, then again, that place name would be required in that section. What is required in this destination section is the contact information, so both the name and the phone number of the facility that we're going to or person that we're going to. So we can just put Adrian here. And phone number, well, as much as I would love to list his phone number, we're just going to pretend that that's his phone number there. And finally, the pilot information in the NAV CANADA section. So this is specific to Canadian pilots. You're going to have to fill all your contact information, your phone number and your license number, as well as 3 NAV CANADA specific items. So the undercarriage for search and rescue purposes, NAV CANADA wants to know the arrival report. I'm going to be a little more specific here. I'm going to say I'm going to file with London FIC. If I know the flight information center that I'm operating in, and my ELT type for today's flight, I have an automatic fixed. So I'm going to fill that all out in there. When I'm satisfied with that, you hit the file button. Are you ready to file this VFR flight plan for this registration departing 8 minutes from now? Yes, I am. And we're going to file that flight plan. You will get a confirmation both visually like that, but also through your email, the email that you listed on the flight plan, as well as the email that's associated with your ForeFlight account. You see that I have 2 options here, cancel or amend. With regards to VFR flight plans in Canada, you always have the option to cancel or amend prior to your estimated time of departure.
We get a lot of questions on how charts work in ForeFlight. So this is a great feature, and it's something that I want to dive into a little bit here. So let's start with a view of the VNC chart in the Ottawa area. And first thing to note is you can always check what settings you have selected by tapping the map settings button there at the top, the little gear button, and then you want to scroll down, and then you're looking for map touch action. So you tap on that. You can see right now I've got no action selected. So there's 3 different options in this menu. You can have no action, bring chart to front, and bring chart to front with legends. So what those settings mean is how the charts and how ForeFlight is going to react as you zoom in, as you tap on the charts. So let's kind of put this into practice and try out these settings. I'll explain them as we go. So first one, let's just look at no action. So if I select that, and we're going to look in at Ottawa here at the VNC, and we're going to zoom in, And you can see there's a change there. So ForeFlight is cycling to the VTA for the Ottawa area. So I'm going to zoom back out again here slowly. And ForeFlight transitions back to the VNC chart. And then if I zoom back in again, ForeFlight's going to cycle back to the VTA chart. Okay, so that's with no action selected, and that's an automatic transition that's happening as you zoom in on any area where there's an inset terminal chart. It's going to bring it forward automatically. So, for example, maybe you want to keep this zoomed in view here, but you want to actually cycle back to the VNC chart. You do not want to see this terminal area chart. Here is a reason where you'd want to go and select Map Touch Action, and then change it to Bring Chart to Front, and go back to the map. So now what I can do is actually, instead of just zooming and having it automatically change, I can tap on the map, and it's going to cycle whatever is below it forward. So in this case, the VNC was lower, so it cycles that forward into view. I can zoom in, get it nice and close, and it doesn't automatically change to the VTA. Now, if I want to change it back to the VTA, again, you just tap on the chart again.
Now, Adrian, if I wanted to know what map I'm looking at, is there a way to see a legend?
Perfect question. So that brings us into the final setting here, which is Map Touch Action, Bring Chart to Front with Legends. So I'm going to tap on that, and let's take a look. So it's kind of cool, actually, to be able to zoom out and see the full chart as it would have been in its paper form. And that's what this allows you to do, is see the full colors of the chart. So now I'm going to zoom out. And we can see here that it's showing the color of the chart with the legend. You can zoom in here on this. We can see this is actually the Montreal chart. Okay, you can see it just as if you had the paper chart. And if I zoom out even more, you can kind of see where that chart sits. So this also helps you get a better sense of where these charts are sitting as within ForeFlight. So if I tap another one above here, ForeFlight's going to load that chart with the legends as well. So you can see where these different charts are overlaid. And in an area like Montreal, if we go down into Montreal here, there's actually, I think there's 3 or 4 VNC charts that are all overlapping in this area. So this is a great spot where you want to have it set to Bring Chart to Front or Bring Chart to Front with Legends, because that allows you to just tap and continue to cycle the different charts forward. If you're not seeing something that you expected, if you're not seeing the VNC, if you're not seeing the terminal area chart, the VTA, or even if you're kind of seeing a strange overlap between 2 charts, you can just tap on the map, and you're going to bring another one forward that's below it, and you'll probably bring into view what you're looking for. And just another note, this works similarly for the IFR charts. So if we select the IFR chart, it's going to be the same scenario where you can tap to bring things forward. So there it's actually bringing forward with the legends now, a big IFR chart. And if you don't want those legends, I'm going to go back and change it, bring chart to front only, so there won't be those legends. Same functionality, just different charts, IFR, VFR. All right. Another question that we get is, we talked about the VNC, we talked about the VTA. Now, if you've had the paper VTA chart in your hand, you'll know that on the back of the VTA, there's actually a chart, a diagram as well. So where can you find the back of the VTA chart? Now, this can be found on the documents page in ForeFlight. And it's under the under drives, under the NAV Canada drive. So let's go there now. So we'll go documents, and then we'll go to NAV Canada, and we're looking for the VTA folder here at the bottom. So scroll right to the bottom of the NAV Canada drive, tap on VTA, and this is where ForeFlight stores all the charts that appear on the back of the VTA. So if we're looking for the Toronto back of the VTA, I've got that downloaded already. I can tap on that, and there it is. So you can view that chart. Now this chart is not drawn to scale, so it can't be georeferenced and shown on the map like the actual VTA can or the VNC charts can. So it's just available via the documents page, but it's a great resource that you can find here and zoom in and use it as you're doing your flight planning. Another kind of subsection to this is we get questions on where you can find terminal procedure charts. So since we're on the topic of these types of charts, the terminal procedure charts are found via the airports page is the quickest way. So if we're going to bring up an airport, I did my flight training at Brampton. So let's look at CNC3, which is Brampton Airport. And if you go under procedures, so once you bring up the airport, you want to tap on the procedure tab and then tap on other. And if the airport does have a terminal procedures chart associated with it, it will be shown under that other tab. So in this case, we've got the Brampton Caledon VFR terminal procedure chart, which is the one I'm looking for. So I want to tap on that and it's going to display right here. And I can swap it into the orientation that I want. And this is going to show those VFR terminal procedures for if I'm departing from Brampton Airport, flying into the practice area and the VFR routes and checkpoints. And this is part of the CFS, of course. Now, if you ever do need to find the full CFS document, that is can be found via the documents page under that NAV CANADA drive, which contains a lot of really useful document resources for Canadian pilots.
Yeah, it sure does, Adrian. And that's kind of a great segue into our next topic, which is documents and the NAV CANADA drive. So the first thing I'll mention here is that you will need a Canadian subscription to see the NAV CANADA drive. You see that on my screen there. I have a bunch of ones listed, like the FAA and the European drives as well. If you don't have those regions in your subscription, you won't see those drives. So a common question is, hey, I'm looking for the FAA drive, but I don't see it. Well, if you don't have the USA region as a part of your subscription, that's the reason. But aside from that, if you do have the Canadian drive there, the NAV CANADA drive, here's some really significant documents to keep in mind. Here's where you'll find your full AIMS, both in Canadian and French versions, your full CFS, both again Canadian and French, and the Canadian Water Aerodrome Supplement. So those are all pretty big documents, and they are searchable. So if you wanted to tap on any one of these, and I was looking up speed limitations before. That's not how you spell speed. Speed limitations. It'll search the whole document for you. You can also bookmark certain things like RNAV approaches. I have bookmarked here, and it actually does break down the table of contents in an electronic format too. So if you wanted to search by a specific section, you can do that. You can change the list view. You can also invert document colors as well. If you're flying at night and the documents are too bright for your liking, that's where you would, in that settings icon there at the top side, both change the brightness and invert document colors if you wish. That's more for a night flying tip. The other thing I'll mention with documents is, how do we import documents? Well, there's really a couple ways to do it. The easiest way for professional pilots, and even if you're not a professional pilot, but just an easy, if you're managing a lot of devices or airplanes, would be to link a third-party document subscriber like Dropbox, Box, or Amazon S3 to ForeFlight, and that would be included here in your My Drive section. So I have a specific drive that I've linked here, and I simply upload the documents I want to my Dropbox, and they are automatically synced to ForeFlight. I just have to download them onto my device. It's a really easy and handy hands-off way to do it. If you don't like to do that, you can always airdrop individual documents to your device, or email it to yourself. That also works. And then you would just open that document in ForeFlight, and it would appear in your imported drive here. Another really neat way to do it with all these iOS developments lately, there's actually a really neat way to do it. We can run another application in your split screen view. So anything that's compatible if I can just get, there you go, that work in there. So now I've actually opened up my Photos application in my iPad. I can tap and drag right directly into ForeFlight. So I don't really necessarily have to send it to ForeFlight or anything like that. Just drag and drop is kind of a cool feature that's become available with multifunctioning applications at the same time. Now, while I still have this selected, I can actually add other documents as well to be added. So I've selected all 5 of those to be added, and I can just drag it right into ForeFlight and it'll add it there. Just like that. The same functionality exists as well in ForeFlight itself. If I can just get rid of, oh, there you go. That's one way to do it. If I can just get rid of that. But if you want to organize your imported documents into binders, I can actually tap and drag directly into a binder. I can tap several lists or several documents at the same time and then drag and drop. So that's kind of a neat feature to organize quickly instead of having to select each individual document, hit the binders button, and then select the appropriate binder that I want to put it into. So just a little tip and trick on the documents page there. Now I think we'll swing things around, and the next topic we're going to discuss is profile view. So Adrian, go ahead.
All right, another feature that I've used a lot in my own flying, and we get lots of questions on, is the profile view. So here we've got a flight plans in BC, lots of terrain, and we're just starting out here. We've got our departure destination airport, an altitude, and you want to take a look at how this flight and this altitude that we've got selected initially, maybe just the default, is going to work with the terrain that's along the route. So the best way is to tap on the profile button, which is at the bottom right corner of the flight plan menu. And right away, ForeFlight's going to show your route, your climb profile that's based on your aircraft performance. So in this case, I've got a Cirrus SR-22, and it's showing that route with regards to the terrain. So right away, we know that that's not going to work at 4,500 feet. So what I can start to do here is see, well, what might work for this route. So I'll tap, hold, and drag on the altitude here on the left. So I'm just going to tap that, and I'm going to start to scroll up. So let's see if I brought it up to 9,000 feet. Or if we were VFR, I could bring it to 9,500.
All right. Now you can see here that we do have an error at the bottom corner of the profile view, and the route line has also disappeared. So I'll get into that in a little bit more detail in just a minute and how we can fix that. But just so you know, it won't affect how we show the layers that we're going to take a look at here in the profile view.
I can dig in a little bit deeper, and I can look at the top, in the top bar there, it says the highest point is at 8,278 feet, what my clearance is, if there's a strike, and it's showing my corridor width, which is how far on either side of the route that ForeFlight is looking. So you can just continue if you want to, test again. That's going a little bit lower. There's 7,500. We can see that's not going to work for that route. And this brings up actually a key point here. You can see that where the 7,500, when we select 7,500 feet, that ForeFlight's calculating a potential strike at this altitude with the terrain, and everything behind that strike point is showing as like a red kind of lined, a red striped pattern. So we get people asking sometimes, why is a certain portion of my profile view showing this striped red? And that's the portion of the flight after where ForeFlight detects as a potential strike. So if you see that, that's why you're seeing that. You can zoom in as well. So if I just pinch to zoom on the profile view, you can zoom in there and see where that point is occurring. Another thing that's helpful is you can actually tap hold within the profile, and you're going to get this little point showing. So I'm tap holding and drag within the profile view, and it's showing as well on the map where that point is. So if you want to try to find on the map or on the chart where that point is, you can tap hold in the profile view, just do that again, tap, hold, and scroll. And it's also going to scroll along on the chart. So if you wanted to put up the NC chart there, we've just got the terrain map right now. You could overlay any chart and see exactly where that point is. So really powerful feature to really dig in, zoom in on that profile, tap, hold, and drag, see where this stuff is happening. And then again, you can tap, hold, and change your altitude to an altitude that'll work. And if you pinch, zoom out again, I can view my full profile. I had mentioned as well the route corridor. So that's an important factor. So if I tap here on settings, this is where you get your settings. So the corridor width, you can select that option. And this is, like it says, it's the corridor of your route and how far on either side is ForeFlight going to be looking. So if I select, say, 4 nautical miles, now ForeFlight is using a 4 nautical mile corridor. So that's 2 nautical miles on either side of your route. So you can make that as wide and as conservative as you want, as much as 20 nautical miles. So ForeFlight's going to be looking 10 nautical miles on either side of your route for any terrain and obstacles. So you're going to, that seems too wide, but whatever works for you, I bring it back down to 2 nautical miles here. The next thing in profile view is overlaying airspace and weather. So we have an option here where I currently have nothing selected. So these are the overlays for the profile. So let's start by overlaying the airspace. Okay, so there's the view of the airspace that I'm going to encounter along my route. I can tap on that airspace and it's going to show it both on the chart, on the map, and in the profile view. So the Smithers here, CAE from 2,200 AGL up to 12,500, it's Class E. You can see here, if I tap in a little closer, we've got this S168, the surface, to 10,000 feet, and where that goes through my route. Okay, so that's the airspace layer that you can interact with and really familiarize yourself with the airspace along your route. I'm going to turn that off and select icing. Okay, so it's going to load the icing, and you can see the different colors of blue is going to show the intensity of the icing. So we have lighter here and a higher level of chance of icing there. You can also overlay icing on the map if you want to see the legend. So if I go icing, you get that little severity legend at the bottom, which is kind of useful if you just need a refresher to see, okay, well, what's that dark blue is severe. The medium blue here is moderate and the lighter blue is light icing. So if you need to review that, you can just bring up that legend by selecting the either icing layer on the maps page to get that legend. So it looks like at 9,000 feet, there's some potential severe icing along that route. So that's definitely something that I would take quite seriously for this flight, and just shows how profile view can really show you some really key safety information. That may be the difference of not doing that flight, because unless I can climb well above that, I'm not going to be planning a flight into severe icing. So important to be able to see that. Another layer I'm going to select is the turbulence layer. We might not have any turbulence, so that may be why we're not seeing that. I can also kind of compare with the map. So I select the same layer on the maps page and select turbulence global. Again, that's a great way to bring up the legend. And if I zoom out, also when you're selected on the map, there's a slider on the right side to select the altitude. So if I want to select something more lower down here, there we go. We can see most of our route looks pretty clear.
Yeah, I will mention, take this turbulence layer with a huge grain of salt, because as we all know, flying the mountains is very unpredictable as far as icing and turbulence. So although these are great forecasting tools, in reality, if you have crazy winds over the mountains, you're going to get a lot of turbulence, especially at lower altitudes for VFR flights. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're planning a flight in the mountains here.
A couple things I just want to mention here. If you may have noticed that we've got 2 issues. So, and you also might have noticed that we don't have our route line showing in the profile view. So it's good to tap on that button if you see that there's a little red circle with an exclamation mark. Might be some issues. So first one is that saying cruise 7,000 or lower short route. So ForeFlight is saying, basically what it's saying there is that it cannot calculate a route at a higher altitude based on your aircraft's performance data. So if it crunches the numbers, with your performance climb and cruise and descent model for your aircraft, with the distance that you have selected, this is a direct route right now, it's not able to, with the numbers that you've given it for that aircraft, it's not able to climb up above 7,000 in that short distance that you have set. So that can be fixed by adding more waypoints to the route to make the route longer. And I may not do this flight direct anyway. It can even be fixed if you zoom in and kind of do something more realistic in terms of your departure. So we're not going to be departing from the airport and flying directly towards the mountains. We're going to be departing and flying runway centerline. So it might look something like this, where you tap, hold, and drag and set a point there. And right away, that's going to give ForeFlight more nautical miles, and it'll be able to calculate the distances a little bit better. I'm also going to do it at this end, say maybe for the arrival is going to be via over here. Okay. It still may not be enough nautical miles for the route, but you can see that we can now climb to this higher altitude. And there's a new issue where our descent profile may come into contact with the mountains if we're going to do that, the slow descent that I have set up in the aircraft profile, which I believe is 500 feet per minute. So that's another issue, but you can see that did fix the error that said I couldn't climb above 7,000. Now that I added some more miles, I can climb up to 8,500 here, and I'm not getting that error anymore. All right, so we looked at the icing, the turbulence layers, and the airspace, and the last one here I want to take a look at is clouds. So I'm going to tap on that. And I'm also going to bring my altitude here a little higher so we don't have the strike. There we go. And that's going to show the clouds a little bit better. Again, I am going to tap on the clouds layer down here, so I have it both in the profile and on the map. And I can select my altitude to be the same, so I can kind of compare. It also gives me the legend so I can see what I'm looking at today. It looks like a pretty cloudy day. And yeah, I'm looking at a lot of overcast.
So Adrian, I noticed down at the bottom there, you have a timeline. Does that mean that these are clouds that are currently visible, or are these forecasting clouds?
Yeah, great question. So this is really important to note, as Dominik was saying, that this is a forecast for clouds. So this may not be exactly what you're going to encounter en route, because it is a forecast. So this little time slider down here is showing, right now it's showing plus 30 minutes. So 30 minutes ahead of now. And if I animate it, so it's also looking back, and it's showing up to, I can tap, hold, and kind of drag it here slowly. So it's showing there's at 2 p.m. and I can tap even a little more. So 7 hours out at 5 p.m. So those are forecasted clouds at those times. So that's key to know. Thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah, no, very important to mention. We get a lot of inquiries saying, "Hey, I'm at Terrace right now and it's sky clear," but ForeFlight's saying it should be fully overcast. Well, it just means either the forecast was wrong, or it's just not the right time period for what you're looking at. So just something to keep in mind there. These are forecasting tools. They are not 100% accurate, but they do help a lot when you're trying to figure out a plan for the day. So
kind of a hidden feature that a lot of people might not know about is you can use the map ruler in conjunction with the profile view. So I'll just clean up the map here, just take away the clouds for a minute so we have a bit of a cleaner view. And you can see my profile view as it is now. And I'll bring it back down here so it will reflect, there's my route. Okay, so if it shows the route. Now, say if you don't want to change your route, but you want to take a look at what the terrain might look like just off your route. So what if I was flying along here and it looks like fairly mountainous here. So I'm going to tap, hold, with 2 fingers right there. And I'm going to start taking a look at this terrain. Now, you can see that the profile view will actually start following the map ruler now when I have that active. So that's a really cool way to just look, okay, well, if I was to fly off the route in this direction at 7,500 feet, how's that going to work with that altitude and the terrain that's over in this direction? Obviously, it's looking like it's fairly close. And you can continue to do that in anywhere. You can zoom back out and the ruler just disappears. I can tap hold 2 fingers again. And I want to come off the route here. You can see as we cross that river, you can see how the profile view shows that dip there over the river. And if I come up this way, it's going to actively change based on the terrain data. So really great way to take a look at what different different headings, different directions may look like with terrain. And you can do this both. You can do it in flight if you want to. It will actively work whether you're in flight or where I use it mostly. It's just if I'm planning on the ground.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Adrian. Just to continue kind of on the terrain awareness and planning side of things, we definitely took a good look at profile view and how that helps planning your route. There's also a bunch of other features in ForeFlight that can help in this scenario. So I'm going to use ForeFlight. I'm going to use Adrian's example from Terrace to Smithers, BC, as it is a very, very good and tricky route for VFR pilots. We're going to take a look here, and we're actually going to follow the VFR route corridor that extends from Terrace to Smithers. And essentially, it just follows the valley there. So I'm going to make my route kind of conform to that as much as I can. And it goes all the way to the north there, and then down into Smithers, BC. Just for visual purposes, I'm going to turn off the VNC there. And we're going to show some shaded and colored terrain. Now, in the settings menu here, I can customize what I see. So in the terrain section, I can put both shaded terrain and colored terrain on, whatever I prefer. And I can also display peaks, passes, and cables. Now, as a VFR pilot in this type of terrain, I definitely would want to see that. So I'm going to choose colored terrain and peaks, passes, and cables. And you can also turn on and customize a bunch of other things with the aeronautical elements of what you see on the screen. Going back to what we're looking at here, Terrace and Smithers, BC. One of the most useful features I find for single engine VFR pilots in these conditions would be to turn on your glide advisor. So if we scroll down to map overlays, we see that we have a glide advisor option. If I've set a specific glide speed and glide ratio for my aircraft, I can turn that on and visually see on the map how my glide is going to change based on wind, based on altitude, and based on my speed. Right now, I'm a little off track there, so let's just adjust where I would be in reality here. There you go. And what I'm seeing is a dynamic view of where I can glide to with my airplane while I'm traveling through this valley. Now, that to me is pretty incredible. I would love to have this up as I'm flying through this valley, just in case something were to happen. I mean, I don't have many options, but at least it gives me that sense of security. Like, okay, I can glide to the side of that riverbed there, right, and hope for the best. But giving me the best chance of success for that landing. Things to mention with the glide advisor. So a lot of individuals ask us, how do I get my glide ratio and how do I set it? If we go back to that settings menu and hit glide settings, this is where I can set my glide performance for that specific aircraft and configure other aircrafts if I so choose to. My glide speed is 88 knots and my glide ratio is 9.6. That means for every 9.6 feet forward, I lose 1 foot in altitude. A lot of different POHs list glide ratios in a lot of different ways. There may be some math involved to get your glide ratio. things, a lot of them express it in like 1.3 nautical miles per 1,000 feet. So you just have to convert the nautical miles into feet and kind of go from there. But if you ever do have an issue trying to convert or getting your glide ratio, please send us an email, team@foreflight.com, and we can always try to help you out there. We do have a lot of glide ratios already figured out for different types of aircraft. One thing to keep in mind, though, the glide ratio for most fixed wing powered airplanes is going to be somewhere between 5 and 15. So that's kind of, if you're getting something way off from that, then you might have to reconsider or recalculate or take another look at that.
And Dom, in terms of the winds for that, so that's obviously really powerful. I've seen it where if you're heading in one direction, you can see that the glide ring or the glide line really extends like far in the one direction, obviously, because that's you have a tailwind at that point. But if you in the other direction behind you, where you'd have the headwind, it's almost like cropped. It's really short because your glide range would obviously be really short there. So wind is plays a big factor. But how does it work? Say in this kind of scenario, where does the wind information come from? Does it help if we pack? I guess pack for the flight to save that information for this kind of flight.
Yeah, very, very good point. We always recommend to pack for flights like this, and by pack we mean store the weather information, the most current weather information you have prior to your flight, because that will help ForeFlight calculate more accurate things, like glide advisor. So if we had a wailing wind from the west right now, the glide advisor would be affected, and it would say you can't glide very far west right now because of that wind. If you don't have the winds available for the flight, then you'll still be able to get glide advisor. You just will have no wind calculation, so it won't be as accurate. And then the third kind of option is to have live winds, where you're connected to an ADS-B device. Not so applicable for Canadian pilots, but you would get live or more up-to-date wind information, winds aloft information that would help those calculations. But the best advice I can give Canadian pilots is always pack prior to your flight, because it will help your calculations. And in this case, it'll help your glide advisor.
And if you're connected to, say, like a Garmin, if you're getting the XM, some Canadian pilots may fly with that type of device, and you get XM weather while you're in flight. And if ForeFlight receives the wind information, then it'll use that for the glide advisor too in that scenario, which is useful.
Yep, Sirius XM, yeah, exactly. The GDO 52 is a great option. All right, kind of continuing on this path, one thing I would definitely use in this scenario would be the new Hazard Advisor preview available in ForeFlight. How do I access that? Well, I'm going to drop down my left-hand menu here, and I'm going to tap Hazard Advisor. Now, previously, you actually had to be in the air for Hazard Advisor to show you hazards in your route of flight. So whether it be yellow or red, mountainous terrain. But now you're actually able to scroll and take a live look at the hazard based on a preset GPS altitude. Now, what I've done is just selected the Hazard Advisor from my menu there, and on the right-hand side, I'm able to scroll through different altitudes to see how that terrain would affect parts of my route. Now, I'm flying this at around 5,000 feet or 4,500 feet right now. It's just okay because I'm in the valley. But if I want to cross a certain ridge at a certain altitude, I could take a look here and say, okay, well, at 3,800 feet, my options are very limited, right? And it really does give you a beautiful representation of the terrain in and around the area. As you can see, it's snapping back to my current altitude. So the auto mode will always take whatever altitude you're currently at, but I can preview it for a few seconds, and that little timer bar there will start. I believe it's from 5 to 10 seconds there, and it'll snap back to your auto altitude selector, which is what you're currently flying at. Another very, very useful feature. It's a really neat representation of where we are and how the altitude will affect us on our route, depending on what altitude we fly at. Another really great feature along this route that I would recommend for those who have the 3D view option available as part of their subscription, we can actually preview this whole route using 3D view. I've personally never flown from Terrace to Smithers, so this is something I would do pre-flight. I would take a look at what the terrain actually looks like based on images. I can even overlay those options that Adrian talked about, which is icing, turbulence, and cloud layers, to see how those layers will affect me along my route of flight at 5,000 feet or at 4,500 feet. I can also just play the flight out and take a look at, okay, well, I'm going to be on the eastern side of this ridge here. I might want to adjust my point there a little center of the river and vice versa. And it's really a beautiful view. And you can see that there's actually airport icons integrated directly into the 3D preview. So I can look at, okay, is that a viable option for an emergency landing airport? I can tap on that airport and say, and get more information on it by looking in the CFS, for example. Okay, well, that's a 3,300 foot runway that I could use in case of an emergency, right? So it's a really neat kind of way to preview your flight and discover things along your route without actually having to fly the route in the first place, right?
Yeah, I found this so useful, like especially, when you're flying VFR in terrain that you're in environment that you're not familiar with, even just finding the airport or seeing like how am I going to come in on that base, or how am I, to final transition, or, how is this all going to look? This gives you the power to preview that. So I've had these flights where I've previewed them in the 3D preview in ForeFlight. And then, when you're actually there flying it, and you're seeing that, the terrain's there, and here's the airport, and this is kind of, it's familiar. It's almost like you've flown there before. So it creates way better situational awareness when you're flying into somewhere that you've never been before. Not everything feels totally new, and you're picking up landmarks already that you saw, and it allows you more time to kind of focus, enjoy the flight, and also focus on other important things that you need to be doing as you're coming into an approach. So I really recommend using this feature anytime you're going to somewhere new, to just get a sense for how that approach and whether it's a VFR circuit or anything is going to work, and how it's going to look.
Yeah, and right away, like coming in from the north here, I know to look for the airport west of or east of the lake, right? And it's in between the lake and the river. So it's a really kind of additional feature that I think is very, very useful going into unknown airports. And those that 3D preview there is very, very handy, especially into terrain and unfamiliar airports. So.
All right, so another feature that I find really useful and powerful, and we get a number of questions on, is runway performance. So this is available in ForeFlight via the flights page. So here we have our flight from Smithers to Terrace, and it's on the flights page. We've got our departure destination airports, and you can see there's a takeoff and a landing button for the departure and for the destination. Now, this is the takeoff and landing performance that ForeFlight offers, and this is with Performance Plus subscription. So if you don't have a Performance Plus subscription, you won't see this option. But if you do, you have this tool available to you. So I'm going to go ahead and tap on the takeoff, and we'll take a look at our takeoff from runway 15 here, runway 15. You can select that and change it if it was incorrectly selected. You can see here the nice crosswind and headwind, tailwind kind of components that ForeFlight lays out. So runway 15 is the preferred runway for winds for sure, because we got a 7-knot headwind, 2 knots of crosswind. It's giving us our runway dimensions, length, it's asphalt and slope. So all that information is preloaded and it's there. So it's very useful. So we can right away select that. we have quite a lot of length, 7,544 feet. Our slope is pre-populated in there. Again, you can select that if you wanted to make a change. If you know that the slope is less than that, for example, or maybe it's more, you can adjust those settings. Runway is dry paved, so you can make a change there if you need to. And then ForeFlight's pulling in the wind information from the METAR. The next thing here is our aircraft configuration. So we've got our takeoff weight, and I've got it at 2,637 pounds. Maybe that I've just done my weight and balance, and I found, I added another bag and actually and a passenger maybe. So I'm going to bump that up a little bit to say 3,120 pounds. Takeoff flap is at 50%. Air conditioner. Say if it's a hot day, we've got it on. So air conditioning, you can select that. And then safety distance factor. So right now it's just using a factor of 1. I actually like to add an additional safety factor. So I'm going to put it at, I'm going to put it at 2. Okay. There's some emergency return options that you can go into. We won't go into all of those today. And then there's the performance. So we can see here that ForeFlight is calculating our liftoff speed, our ground roll speed at 50 feet, total distance. So climb rate gradient, all that information is there for you to review and confirm is correct. So the total distance here, we've got 3,090 feet is what's being calculated with 77 knots at 50 feet as we lift off and start to climb out. So we are well within the runway distances. Again, if you need to review them, they're here. The declared distances, takeoff runway available 7,544 feet. So we're well within that today. But as you can imagine, you get to some airports, in the summer, it might have a shorter runway, and it might even have some be at higher elevation, and you start to get pretty close to the, your takeoff roll, calculated takeoff roll will get close to the runway distance that's available. And this feature is going to show you if you're getting close to that zone where your takeoff roll is almost at what the runway distance is. All right, so let's dive into the landing section now. Okay, so here we go. We'll just tap the landing button on the flights page. I'm going to select the runway, and let's see, we're going to land on, it's a little bit shorter. Let's select the runway 03. Gives me my usable length again, slope, dry paved, the wind's pulled in. Let's say our altimeter setting, we're going to correct this. Maybe it's a little lower. Put that in, or what our landing weight is. Okay, again, safety distance factor on this one, I'm going to set it 1.5. And there's our performance. Okay, our ground roll, so 1,627 feet. It's even going to give us a go-around climb speed and climb rate, which is great. Climb gradient, if you need that. Some of the charts say that it requires a certain climb gradient, so we have that. So there we go. So we've got our total distance, 3,611 feet, and our runway is, if we look at the different takeoff runway available, takeoff distance, and then we've got the final one here, we've got accelerate, stop distance available, the final one, landing distance, LDA, landing distance available, 5,371 feet. So we're well within that. So quick checks done, and we know that we're well within our limitations for both the takeoff and landing numbers for our aircraft. And again, just a note, this is based on the pre-configured performance profile that ForeFlight has for the SR-22. ForeFlight has quite a few performance aircraft profiles that you can just select. They have this pre-configured information, everything from the flap settings to the speeds are supported. And you can check online on ForeFlight's performance aircraft section to see what aircraft are supported, but there's a huge number of aircraft that are supported, and as long as there's a ForeFlight profile available, all this takeoff and landing distance information will be populated and available here on the flights page.
Another new feature that we want to talk about today is ForeFlight's new enhanced weight and balance. And here we are on the weight and balance page, and this feature is now even more streamlined for Canadian pilots because we can add aircraft using the aircraft type codes, and it just makes it more efficient process. So let's take a look at that here. So if we want to tap on the weight and balance profile selection menu at the top left, and this brings up our menu that shows any enhanced profiles that we've already created. So I've got a couple there, as well as any legacy profiles. These are previous weight and balance profiles that you have created, and you can tap on those and work through the migration process to bring them into the enhanced profiles. And that can be done here. And if you want to create a new weight and balance profile, tap on the plus button at the top right corner. And that's going to bring up this menu where you can just enter in our aircraft type code, so SR22. And I can see that we have two pre-configured profiles for SR22 turbo and non-turbo. So I'm going to select the SR22 and select my 4-seat arrangement. And then we have to answer just a couple questions here. So you can look in your POH and find your basic empty weight CG. So the CG for the aircraft, which in this case is 144.86, as well as your basic empty weight. So I've got 2454. And after that, the rest of the weight and balance profile here has been already set up. So you just want to go down and confirm the stations for front seats and rear tail compartment. Those are all correct. If you want to add another station, you can go ahead and tap the Add Station button and select the type and enter that station. We've got our forward and our aft CG limits. So again, confirm those with the POH with your CG limits information or CG limits graph that you have in your POH. And then once that's complete, tap on Back. And that's going to bring you back to the weight and balance selection menu and also add the new profile that we just created. So you can see now we have the Cirrus with the 4-seat arrangement. I can tap on that to open up that weight and balance profile. And from here, we're just starting to add our loads. So we've got a pilot. You can tap on pilot. You can either enter a load weight, or you can even scroll down and use a standard weight if you prefer. So I'm going to add a standard weight there for the pilot. Add something here in the cargo. So I'm going to say 25 pounds. Just manually enter that in the cargo. And fuel tanks. So I can go into the fuel with contingency fuel, and the total fuel I'm going to enter 25 gallons. And there we go. So we have a nicer graph now shown on the right side with the flight information. You can also tap on the summary button, and that's going to bring up a nice summary of our weight and balance information there. And you can even tap the Send To button at the top right, and that gives you the option to airdrop or email this weight and balance summary, just for if you need to email it to yourself or to someone else. And one thing that's really nice about the new enhanced weight and balance feature is for Performance Plus customers, you can now access your weight and balance from the flights page. So there's integration between flights and the enhanced weight and balance. So this means that you can create your flight on the flights page. You can enter your fuel policy and your payload information, and then go right into your weight and balance for that flight. And that information is going to cross over to your flight and apply to all the numbers that you have already set up on your flights page. So really nice additional functionality there, and something that we've been asked about, and it's nice to see that that's now available. So again, just to review, if you have any legacy weight and balance profiles that you've created previously, and you can migrate those profiles via the weight and balance selection menu here. So you can see I have a number of legacy profiles. You can tap on that, and ForeFlight is going to walk you through the process of migrating that profile into the new enhanced weight and balance format. And if you run into any issues, or you have any additional questions on the new enhanced weight and balance or the process of migrating profiles or setting up these profiles, we recently did a specific webinar on the enhanced weight and balance in ForeFlight. So I recommend checking that out, and it's at foreflight.com/webinars.
Thanks, Adrian. Yeah, I really love the new weight and balance profiles. It does take some getting used to, especially if you're migrating profiles to the new sections there. But it's really, really nicely laid out once you do get it all set up. And the links between flights and weight and balance has been something that's been missing for a while. So I'm glad that's finally there. I want to kind of steer things in a bit of a different direction now. Another question we get often is about fuel prices in ForeFlight. Do these fuel prices include tax? How do I know where you're getting these fuel prices from? So I want to just direct you to my screen here. And I'm in Southwestern Ontario, so I'm going to try to find the cheapest fuel price for a flight today in the area. So I'm going to select my 100 low lead fuel price because that's the fuel that my aircraft takes. And sometimes it's kind of hard just by looking at this to determine where exactly the lowest fuel price is, because oftentimes fuel prices will be listed with tax and some will be listed without tax, which gives you a false sense that it is cheaper, whereas it's just displaying the price without tax. So I'm going to just dive in on how fuel prices are updated. So ForeFlight users can update fuel prices themselves, but they can also be updated by FBOs and the fuel retailer themselves as well. So we give access to FBOs and fuel retailers to update their own fuel prices. If you were to look in ForeFlight and you tap on a fuel price, you see at the Brand Flight Center, they're selling fuel for 100 low lead for $256. If you tap on details, on the bottom right-hand side, you can see that there's an update fuel price button there. And if I were in Brampton and I saw that the fuel price was different than what's being listed on ForeFlight, I can actually go in and update that myself. Please don't put in any fuel prices that you don't know the price of, like self-serve or Jet A, because ForeFlight will just dismiss the blank sides and just take in what you've actually put in. So if fuel is actually $256 and you want to list that, then please go ahead and submit that, and that'll be updated. It is reviewed by ForeFlight just for accuracy, and it is updated in ForeFlight itself. You can see there that prices are being reflected in Canadian dollars and the prices are in liters. And it also tells you when the last update was done. So updated over a month ago might be a little bit out of date. So you might want to contact the FBO directly. You also might want to contact them directly because you're not sure if this price includes fuel or it doesn't. A great way to kind of figure out if it does is to go into the comments section in the FBO, and it says someone has commented 100 low lead price is per liter and includes tax, and there's no jet fuel available. So this is a really easy way for you to say, okay, well, that's $256 including tax, and that's the anticipated fuel price in Brampton. Now, it was over a month ago, so you might want to just call them and make sure. And to do that, again, in the FBO section, you can have the contact information listed there for you to give them a quick call and just verify the fuel price. Now, that was a red icon there because that was one of the most expensive prices in the region. But if I tapped on the Collingwood Regional Airport, it's green. It has 100 low lead listed as $219. If I go into the details there, I can see that, it's listed in Canadian, and there's a 13% HST not included in the fuel price. It's listed right there, and it's listed in the About section too. So this particular retailer has explicitly listed that, hey, the $219 is not including tax. And if you go further into the comments section on what other pilots have experienced, is that, yeah, it does, this $219 does in fact not include tax. The next thing I want to talk about is how to enter flight numbers and routing for commercial passengers. So this is kind of a neat feature in ForeFlight. I'm an av geek myself, so I like using this pretty much every time I fly on a commercial flight. But ForeFlight has these hidden things that are available to you. If you are a user of ForeFlight and you do get on a commercial flight, you can actually put in your flight number directly in the search bar on the top right-hand side of the maps page. So, for example, I plan to take a flight later on this month from Calgary to Toronto. My flight number is WS656. I can go scroll down and it actually appears as a scheduled flight under the aircraft section. If I tap that, it will actually provide me with the scheduled flights and routing for that particular commercial flight. I can tap that and it will actually display the routing that commercial flight plans to take, the latest filed routing. And you can follow along in the air. What's really neat is that you can also pack for this flight, so you can select a similar aircraft to what you're flying. Let's go with the 737. And you can pack for this route. And if it departs tomorrow, you can set your estimated time of departure for 12 p.m. tomorrow, for example, or whenever it's supposed to depart. And if I pack for this route, I can then display turbulence, for example, along my route of flight. So I don't need the pilots telling me if it's going to be a bumpy ride. I can see myself based on the altitude. Now, this is a really, really kind of abstract thing if you want to do as just a regular passenger, but I find it pretty useful because if I'm flying with my family, I can provide them a little more insight than it might be bumpy or it might not be bumpy type thing. Using the internet traffic feature on the ground, so I'm going to turn off turbulence there and I'm going to turn on traffic. So internet traffic is a feature available to pilots on the ground. And once you zoom in, you can actually see all the live traffic in the area. So if I wanted to look up my inbound flight number, for example, I can type in, and I'm on the ground waiting in Toronto or Calgary, I can type in my inbound flight number, and if it's in the air, it shows up as an internet traffic option. So that internet traffic option, I can tap, and I can just view it coming in, which is another really neat feature. And it uses FlightAware's information, so it does update every couple of seconds, and just based on its current track and speed there. So that's a really neat thing. The last thing I want to mention as far as kind of commercial traffic information, if you're at an airport like Pearson and you tap on the airport info section, scrolling all the way down to the bottom, not all the way down, but relatively down to the bottom, you can actually find a flight tracking section. And that flight tracking section will give you the scheduled arrivals, departures, and all the aircraft en route to that destination. What it does is essentially just give you a FlightAware link that will list all those arrivals and departures for you. So again, another kind of a neat way to view inbound commercial flights in ForeFlight, track them yourselves, or just see what's coming into an airport, which is the AvGeek thing to do, I think, in my opinion, Adrian. And just wanted to mention that. All right, the last thing we want to mention and discuss in today's webinar is ADS-B in Canada. We do get quite a bit of questions regarding is ADS-B available in Canada? What type of ADS-B is available in Canada? You know, I heard something about a mandate coming up, this and that. And it's sometimes hard to demonstrate or to tell pilots exactly what is and is not included because the information can be kind of convoluted. So let's talk about ADS-B in Canada. ADS-B in Canada is being implemented in a very staged approach. Parts of this process have been implemented by NAV CANADA already, although it applies to a very high level commercial traffic, you know, in Class A airspace in only certain areas. So for the general aviation public, it may seem kind of like, oh, I keep hearing about this ADS-B thing. What's going on? So first thing to mention is that ADS-B in Canada is different than ADS-B in the US. ADS-B in Canada is being developed as space-based ADS-B, which is different technology than what the ground station ADS-B that's being used in the US is. So that's kind of the first thing to keep in mind. The second thing to keep in mind is that there are no hard dates for any mandates in Canada at this time. Guidelines are being kind of brought out, and it's really unclear how this is being handled by Transport Canada if they're just delegating it to NAV Canada. But basically, rough dates are that phase 1 of this will apply to Class A and B airspace in and around 2023. And the plan is to bring the space-based ADS-B to more GA side of things, with Class C, D, and E airspace being phased in no earlier than 2026. Now, what does this mean for the general aviation pilot? Well, it does mean that you will have to get your aircraft equipped with the transponder installation or whatever it is that provides ADS-B out for this space-based equipment. And is that going to be also applicable to working in the States? So from what we've determined from the NAV Canada website is that it will be both. ADS-B will both work in Canada and in the US once you get the requirements in place in your aircraft. So that's something to keep in mind there. I don't think there's much to be worried about just at this time. There's still a lot to be figured out. There's a lot of pushback with generation in general, just organizations like COPA trying to engage the government in more discussion before this is rolled out, because at the end of the day, it is going to cost the individual aircraft owner a little bit of money to get his or her aircraft equipped with this, where as it did in the States in the 2020 mandate. And what does that mean as far as rebates, or, if I wanted to fly without a transponder or ADS-B out equipment, what does that mean in the future? And so again, there's a lot of questions. We just want to address some of the things that are currently applicable for ADS-B pilots in ForeFlight, and if you're flying in Canada or the US. So I'm going to hand it off to Adrian here to discuss a little bit more about, okay, what if I do have an ADS-B out receiver right now, or I have an ADS-B in receiver? What am I going to see in Canada? And what kind of products and services do things like Sentry give me right now? So I'll hand it off to Adrian right now, and we'll talk about that.
All right. Thanks, Tom. And it's important to recognize, as Tom was mentioning, and as talking about the mandate, this ADS-B out. So there's two separate parts to ADS-B. There's the ADS-B out portion, where your aircraft is capable of broadcasting your position information out that could be to other aircraft or to satellite or ground-based stations that can receive that information. There's also ADS-B in. So that's the ability, or having a receiver like the Sentry that can receive ADS-B information. And it's also good to note that you can have one or the other, or both, or neither, of course, in some cases. So you may not have ADS-B out in your aircraft, but you may have a Sentry ADS-B receiver. One thing that's interesting to note is there is a project, and I'll bring up their website here. It's called the Canadian In-Flight Information Broadcasting Association. And they have actually spearheaded a project where they are implementing their own ADS-B towers in Southern Ontario. So they have, I think, 4 installations now, or 3 or 4 sites. You can see here in Stratford and in Burlington, Parry Sound, Oshawa, that are online. And these installations are broadcasting ADS-B information that can be received by any receiver that's capable of receiving that frequency of ADS-B. So if you had a Sentry, you would be able to receive some ADS-B from these towers in Southern Ontario. So it's interesting that there's this project. It's great, and it would provide some ADS-B weather in this area of Canada. Of course, though, in other areas of Canada, you're not going to be able to receive ADS-B weather.
With that, I think we've covered the top 10 topics we wanted to cover today. And I want to thank Adrian for joining me today for this joint webinar, one of the first we've done.
It's been great.
Yeah, and I think we like this format, and we're going to continue doing it in the future. So I want to thank you for that. And if you do have any further questions, we're always on frequency 7 days a week, team@foreflight.com. We also have some great useful resources, our pilot's guide, which is available both in-app and online. And we too come out with these webinars and videos on a regular basis too. So those can be found on www.foreflight.com/videos or /webinars.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for staying with us there as we were trying to cover all those topics. There's definitely a lot to cover today, and we got a bunch of questions, which is really great. I appreciate you all sending those in. We're going to jump into some of those now, and Dominik and I will go through them and answer some. Just want to say as well, if you didn't get your question answered, or if you have more questions, please don't hesitate to send those to team@foreflight.com, and we'll get back to you with some really detailed information. Sometimes that's the best way to get a real detailed reply is to do that as well. So first question that I've got here is, are there alternate information sources for weather when flying north in Canada? And that's a great question. And I just wanted to touch on first, I think one of the best ways to get in-flight weather when flying in Canada is through SiriusXM. It's one of the only ways to get reliable in-flight weather, as we don't have ADS-B weather in Canada like we do in the US. So SiriusXM weather with a device like a Garmin GDL 51, which can receive XM, or 52, which receives both XM and ADS-B. So either of those receivers are great, and they work with ForeFlight. And then to kind of answer this question, what's available when you're flying very far north in Canada, it's important to note that SiriusXM coverage, so that would include like radar coverage as you're flying, it doesn't actually extend fully north to all of Canada. So in the far northern areas, like Nunavut was asking this question, may not have that SiriusXM coverage. So in areas like that, really the only reliable in-flight weather source that I'm aware of is using satellite-based internet weather. So that would be some aircraft fly with a satellite onboard Wi-Fi system like a GoGo or a SATCOM direct router. So both of those can be used with ForeFlight and would provide satellite weather through that system. And that would be the only thing that I'm aware of in those areas where there's no ADS-B weather, no SiriusXM weather available. So good question there.
All right. Yeah, absolutely, and that's exactly it. You would have to have a cellular support up there to get any type of weather, just because there's no coverage up there. So, thanks, Adrian. I will take another question here. Well, with regards to filing flight plans, how long does it take for a flight plan to go through, and should we file well in advance, or does it go through basically right away? The answer is basically right away. After filing, your flight plan is transmitted directly to ATC. The one caveat there is that it's transmitted directly and right away as long as your estimated time of departure is within 22 hours. If you're filing a flight plan that has an estimated time of departure more than 22 hours in the future, then those flight plans are actually held until 22 hours before and then transmitted to ATC. So that's just the one little kind of piece of information there. But if you are sitting your aircraft and you're filing a flight plan, you send it away, that should be filed and sent to the ATC system pretty much right away. So it should they should have it pop up pretty instantaneously. Another flight planning question. Within Canada, if you cancel the flight plan within the app, do you still have to call NAV Canada? The answer is no. However, if that cancellation occurs pretty close to your estimated time of departure, I would recommend that you do give NAV Canada a call just to make sure that they receive the cancellation, just to make sure that they don't assume that you've departed if there's a bit of a delay there. So I'd say, within 15 minutes of your estimated time of departure, if you cancel it, just give them a call and make sure. Otherwise, I've canceled many flight plans through just ForeFlight itself, and testing out some things, and I've never received any issues. I will say, if you file and cancel a bunch of flight plans in a row, for whatever reason, I have gotten a call from NAV Canada just asking what's going on, or from filing them by accident, or whatever the case may be. So they're actually pretty good with that. They're good with monitoring what's going on, and they'll be happy to give you a call just so you're not bombarding them with cancellations and things like that.
All right. So I'm going to jump down here. I've got another one. Good question. It says here, how do I pack my weather for the flight? So great question. And we didn't really cover this specifically. So to pack for your flight, we talked about how important that was, to have that information saved. You will, on the maps page in ForeFlight, when you have the FPL menu in view with your route information, there's a little button that looks like a suitcase. So you want to tap on that suitcase, and it's going to bring up the pack menu for your flight. And you can see that ForeFlight will automatically look at your route corridor, as well as there's a circle on either side of your departure and destination airport that it looks at. And that's where you can pack your weather, fuel prices, NOTAMs, and any charts that you may not already have saved. So it's a good way to just kind of check that you have everything. You can either tap the pack button, and ForeFlight will work through all the items and just go through everything and pack everything. Or say if you just wanted to pack, you didn't want the fuel prices, you could just tap on the weather and just pack the weather by itself and not the other items. So look for that little suitcase button on the maps page in the FPL menu in ForeFlight. I think I had a second one that came in here that was an interesting question. I'm going to just address that now here. So the question was, can I plan or can I insert a stop at an airport during a flight plan? And I wanted to address this because I was just recently speaking with NAV Canada about this, because I was curious about the ability to file what's commonly known in Europe as like a stay at a waypoint. And that's something that a stay or a delay is not something that can be filed in Canada. NAV Canada doesn't recognize that. So that's something different, but you can file a stopover at a certain point or at an airport if you would like to do that. So a couple of things to note if you do that. First of all, it's only for a VFR flight. So it's got to be a VFR flight. And if you're going to file that, I would also make a note in the remarks section of the flight plan when you're filing that, and just note that you're stopping. But you can file that in ForeFlight, and NAV Canada is going to recognize a stopover for VFR flights for a certain amount of time that you set. Again, if you have more detailed questions on filing that, please send us an email, and we'll provide kind of more details on that. But I just wanted to let you know that is possible to do that. Again, in my own filing, I find it's often easier just to file to like leg by leg. So if I'm going to fly out to an airport and have lunch and then fly back, I'll usually file for the first leg and then just file for the second leg back, and then I'm not tied to a certain time. And it seems simpler, but it is possible if you'd like to file a stopover. If it's a VFR flight, you can do that.
Yeah, good point. Very good point. There was a question with regards to the document section, why we don't include all the cars. Well, as many of you may know, the cars is pretty extensive, just like the FAA equivalent, which on the FAA side, we do actually include some parts of the regulations in there, but that's something interesting to look at in the future, if we can include some cars references directly in the document section. Obviously, having the whole cars index there would be quite cumbersome, but I think it would be worth us taking a look at including some just important sections, some more commonly referenced ones. So great point there. There was
another question here. Yeah, I just gonna jump in there, Dom. Thanks. There was a question, a couple questions actually, about the profile view. And so this one was, with the profile view, is it possible to set altitudes at specific waypoints? And for heli operations, and I'm sure this could be applied to other types of fixed wing operations as well. Or I think there was a question on step climbs. So so again, the question: can you apply specific altitudes to waypoints along your route, and then have those display in the profile that side profile view that we looked at quite a bit. Great question, and one that we do get now and again. And so first, to start to answer that, you can set an altitude for a specific waypoint using the FPL menu. So if you haven't seen that before, if you built a route, you can tap on one of your waypoints within that route, and there's an option to set altitude and speed. So you can set that altitude or speed there. But if you do move over to the profile view, those altitudes are not currently displayed in the profile view. Where you can see them, if you're on the maps page and you set those altitudes at different waypoints for a helicopter operation or for a step climb, you can then send that flight to the flights page. And if you tap on nav log, that detailed nav log is going to show those points with the specific altitudes and speeds that you have set. But definitely something that we passed on as a feature request is to have that profile view really reflect any altitude waypoints that you have set in the FPL menu.
Awesome. Well, I think that's all the time we have for questions today. Definitely a lot more to talk about and a lot more to answer. But if you have a question and it wasn't answered here, please feel free to email us and we'll be happy to get back to you as soon as we can.
Yeah, and just one as a final note here. Again, just thanks for everyone for joining in. And if you do have any questions or you want to learn more about what features are available within the different subscription levels, go to the ForeFlight website, and there's the buy page or the pricing page, and it has a great kind of breakdown of the 3 subscriptions: Performance, Pro, and Basic Plus. So Basic Plus, Pro Plus, and Performance Plus, and a breakdown of what features are available in each of those levels. So if you're kind of confused, is this in this subscription or is it in the other subscription type? I just recommend going there and taking a look, and it's a really nice breakdown and kind of shows all those different features and what subscription that they're associated with.
Yeah, very good point. There's a lot of different features available on different subscription levels, so it's hard to cover all of them and what exactly the breakdown is, but just going to the website is a good resource for that. Awesome.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Adrian.
And fly safe.
Take care.